I'm
Yeah,
putting
we're
it live.
not live yet. Okay.
Okay, now we're live. So thank you for everyone that is going to be tuning in to this live stream. I have Nicholas as my guest today. So we are going to do a reading of the short story Reanimator. And how this came in to our live stream is that we were watching a movie from a long time ago. I think it was 19,
1885. Or
1985.
1985, yeah. 1985, yeah.
Thank you. And the name of the movie was also Reanimator. So we decided to check a little bit like from where this movie came from. So it came from a short story from H.P. Lovecraft. And we decided to check it, to read it, and to make sure that um, we do some comments and some discussion about it. So that's why we're here today. So what's the whole dynamic of all of this live stream? We're going to post or we're going to present the short story, and then we're going to read it out loud, and then we're going to start discussing it. So we suggest you guys to check the movie as well, which is really good. I promise you it will be a really good for you. I think it will be a really good movie if you are interested in the H.P. Lovecraft short stories. We will be dividing this specific short story, which is which is going to be different from the last short story that we were into. So this is going to be part 1 that will be from the first chapter of 6 chapters that has this small short story, let's say it so. So let me try and get the short story in the screen. So you want to add something for what I said, Nicholas?
No. We plan to have more discussion after we've read it, but I think you did a really great intro there.
Okay, so let me try and get it here. So first of all, we are getting this information online. You can get it online as well. You just have to search for Herbert West Reanimator, which is the name of the short story written by H.P. Lovecraft. That's the way that you are going to check it out if you want to search it online. And it's available. Anyone can download it or can copy it. And the first chapter that we are going to read is called From the Dark. So let me get it here. Okay. There you go. I think I'm going to try and do the same thing that I did the last time. So if there is any message, I can read it.
Oh, that's interesting. I tried posting the link to this page, and it showed up for me before we started the live stream, but my comment has disappeared. We
Really?
might talk about that more later. Yeah.
Okay, but I can post the link here, I think.
Yeah, that's what I did, but perhaps because I don't have mods, it didn't let me do it. Great.
Okay, that's strange, but we'll see why. Okay, let me just try to I think that's enough. I think.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes. So as I said, the first chapter is called From the Dark, and that's what we're going to read right now. We're going to stop and just to let you know, Nicholas, we're going to try not to spoil anything else that comes from, like, apart from this specific chapter. So I'm going to try and do my best as well.
I will as well. I couldn't help
Yes.
but read ahead, but yeah.
I know. I wanted to do that, but I didn't have enough time. But just in case, let's try not to like spoil for the next live streams. So you want to go ahead?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Herbert West, Reanimator. 1. From the Dark. Of Herbert West, who is my friend in college and in afterlife, I can speak only with extreme terror. This terror is not due altogether to the sinister manner of his recent disappearance, but was engendered by the whole nature of his life work, and first gained its acute form more than 17 years ago, when we were in the third year of our course at the Miskatonic University Medical School in Arkham. While he was with me, the wonder and diabolism of his experiments fascinated me utterly, and I was his closest companion. Now that he is gone and the spell is broken, the actual fear is greater. Memories and possibilities are ever more hideous than realities.
The first horrible incident of our acquaintance was the greatest shock I ever experienced, and it is only the reluctance that I repeat it. As I have said it, it happened when we were in the medical school, where West had already made himself notorious through his wild theories on the nature of death and possibility of overcoming it artificially. His views, which were widely ridiculed by the faculty and his fellow students, hinge on this essentially mechanistic nature of life and concern means of operating the organic machinery of mankind, but calculated chemical action after the failure of natural processes. In his experiments with various animating solutions, he had killed and threatened immense number of rabbits, guinea pigs, cats, dogs, and monkeys, till he had become the prime nuisance of the college. Several times he had actually obtained signs of life in animals, supposedly dead, in many cases violent signs, but he soon saw that the perfection of this process, if indeed possible, will necessarily involve a lifetime of research. It likewise became clear that, since the same solution never worked alike on different organic species, he will require human subjects for further and more specialized progress. It was here that he first came into conflict with the college authorities and was debarred from future experiments by no less a dignitary than the dean of the medical school himself, the learned and benevolent Dr. Allen Halsey, whose work in behalf of the stricken is recalled by every old resident in Arkham.
I had always been exceptionally tolerant of West's pursuits, and we frequently discussed his theories, whose ramifications and corollaries were almost infinite. Holding with Haeckel that all life is a chemical and physical process, and that the so-called soul is a myth, my friend believed that artificial reanimation of the dead can depend only on the condition of the tissues, and that unless actual decomposition has set in, a corpse fully equipped with organs may, with suitable measures, be set going again in the peculiar fashion known as life. That the psychic or intellectual life might be impaired by the slight deterioration of sensitive brain cells, which even a short period of death would be apt to cause, West fully realized. It had at first been his hope to find a reagent which would restore vitality before the actual advent of death, and only repeated failures on animals had shown him that the natural and artificial life motions were incompatible. He then sought extreme freshness in the specimens, ejecting his solutions into the blood immediately after the extinction of life. It was this circumstance which made the professors so carelessly skeptical, for they felt that true death had not occurred in any case. They did not stop to view the matter closely and reasoningly.
It was not long after the faculty had interdicted his work that West confided to me his resolution to get fresh human bodies in some manner, and continue in secret the experiments he could no longer perform openly. To hear him discussing ways and means was rather ghostly, for at the college we had never procured anatomical specimens ourselves. When, whenever, whenever the morgue prove inadequate, two local niggers, niggers attended to this matter.
Negroes.
Negroes
Yep.
attended to this matter, and they were seldom questioned. West was then a small, slender spectacle youth with delicate features, yellow hair, pale blue eyes, and a soft voice, and it was uncanny to hear him dwelling on the relative merits of Christ Church Cemetery and the Potter's Field. We finally decided on the Potter's Field because practically everybody in Christ Church was embalmed, a thing, of course, ruinous to West researches.
Sorry, I had a cat.
Don't worry.
Okay. I was by this time his active and enthralled assistant, and helped him make all his decisions, not only concerning the source of bodies, but concerning a suitable place for our loathsome work. It was I who thought of the deserted Chapman farmhouse beyond Meadow Hill, where we fitted up on the ground floor an operating room and a laboratory, each with dark curtains to conceal our midnight doings. The place was far from any road, and in sight of no other house, yet precautions were none the less necessary, since rumors of strange lights, started by chance nocturnal roamers, would soon bring disaster on our enterprise. It was agreed to call the whole thing a chemical laboratory if discovery should occur. Gradually, we equipped our sinister haunt of science with materials either purchased in Boston or quietly borrowed from the college. Materials carefully made unrecognizable save to expert eyes, and provided spades and picks for the many burials we should have to make in the cellar. At the college, we used an incinerator, but the apparatus was too costly for our unauthorized laboratory. Bodies were always a nuisance, even the small guinea pig bodies from the slight clandestine experiments in West's room at the boarding house.
We followed the local death notice like goals, for our specimens demanded particular qualities. What we wanted were corpses interred soon after death and without artificial preservation, preferably free from malforming disease, and certainly with all organs present. Accident victims were our best hope. Not for many weeks did we hear of anything suitable, though we talked with morgue and hospitals authorities, ostensibly in the college's interest, as often as we could without exciting suspicion. We found that the college had first choice in every case, so that it might be necessary to remain in Arkham during the summer, when only the limited summer school classes were held. In the end, though, luck favored us, for one day we heard of an almost ideal case in the Potter's Field. A Brownlee young workman drowned only the morning before in some Sumner's Pond, and buried at the town's expenses without delay or embalming. That afternoon we found a new grave, and determined to begin work soon after midnight.
It was a repulsive task that we undertook in the black small hours, even though we lacked at that time the special horror of graveyards which later experiences brought to us. We carried spades and oil-dark lanterns, for although electric torches were then manufactured, they were not as satisfactory as the tungsten contrivances of today. The process of unearthing was slow and sordid. It might have been gruesomely poetical if we had been artists instead of scientists, and we were glad when our spades struck wood. When the pine box was fully uncovered, Wes scrambled down and removed the lid, dragging out and propping up the contents. I reached down and hauled the contents out of the grave, and then both toiled hard to restore the spot to its former appearance. The affair made us rather nervous, especially the stiff form and vacant face of our first trophy, but we managed to remove all traces of our visit. When we had patted down the last shovelful of earth, we put the specimen in a canvas sack and set out for the old Chapman place beyond Meadow Hill.
On an improvised dissecting table in the old farmhouse, by the light of a powerful acetylene lamp, the specimen was not very spectral looking. It had been a sturdy and apparently unimaginative youth of wholesome plebeian type, large framed, great eyed, and brown haired, and sound animal without physio- psychological subtleties, and probably having vital processes of the simplest and healthiest sort. Now, with the eyes closed, it looked more asleep than dead, though the expert test of my friend soon left no doubt on that score. We had at last what West had always longed for, a real dead man of an ideal kind, ready for the solution as prepared according to the most careful calculations and theories for human use. The tension on our part became very great. We knew that there was scarcely a chance of anything like complete success, and could not avoid hideous fears at possible grotesque results of partial animation. Especially were we apprehensive concerning the mind and impulses of the creature, since in the space following death some of the more delicate cerebral cells might well have suffered deterioration. I, myself, still held some curious notions about the traditional soul of man, and fell in awe at the secrets that might be told by one returning from the dead. I wondered what sights this placid youth might have seen in inaccessible spheres, and what he could relate if fully restored to life. But my wonder was not overwhelming, since for the most part I shared the materialism of my friend. He was calmer than I, as he forced a large quantity of his fluid into a vein of the body's arm, immediately binding the incision securely.
The waiting was gruesome, but West never faltered. Every now and then he applied his stethoscope to the specimen and bore the negative results philosophically. After about 3/4 of an hour without the least sign of life, he disappointingly pronounced the solution inadequate, but determined to make the most of his opportunity and try one change in the formula before disposing of his ghastly prize. We had that afternoon dug a grave in the cellar and would have to fill it by dawn, for although we had fixed a lock on the house, we wished to shun even the remotest risk of a ghoulish discovery. Besides, the body would not be even approximately fresh the next night. So, taking the solitary acetylene lamp into the adjacent laboratory, we left our silent guest on the slab in the dark and bent every energy to the mixing of the new solution, the weighing and measuring supervised by West with an almost fanatical care.
The awful event was very sudden and wholly unexpected. I was pouring something from one test tube to another, and West was busy over the alcohol blast lamp, which had to answer for a Bunsen burner in this gasless edifice, when from the pitch black room we had left, there burst the most appalling and demoniac succession of cries that either of us had ever heard. Not more unutterable could have been the chaos of hellish sound if the pit itself had opened to release the agony of the damned, for in one inconceivable cacophony was centered all the supernal terror and unnatural despair of animate nature. Human it could not have been. It is not in man to make such sounds, and without a thought of our late employment or its possible discovery, both West and I leaped to the nearest window like stricken animals, overturning tubes, lamps, and retorts, and bolting madly into the stark abyss of the rural night. I think we screamed ourselves as we stumbled frantically toward the town, though as we reached the outskirts we put on a semblance of restraint, just enough to seem like belated rebellers staggering home from a debauch.
We did not separate, but managed to get to West's room, where we whispered with the gas up until dawn. By then, we had calmed ourselves a little with rational theories and plans for investigation, so that we could sleep through the day, classes being disregarded. But that evening, two items in the paper, wholly unrelated, made it again impossible for us to sleep. The old deserted Chapman house had inexplicably burned to an amorphous heap of ashes. That we could understand because of the upset lamp. Also, an attempt had been made to disturb a new grave in the potter's field, as if by futile and spadeless clawing at the earth. That we could not understand, for we had patted down the mold very carefully.
And for 17 years after that, West would look frequently over his shoulder and complain of fancied footsteps behind him. Now he has disappeared.
Great job.
And that's the end of the first chapter, which is From the Dark. So let's start.
Yeah, so I think I can be careful about not spoiling anything from later in the story. I didn't read any plot summaries of the later story, and I've only read, I think, the first three parts. But we can talk more about Lovecraft and this work in particular, which I don't know how much you've looked into him, but I didn't know anything about him, and I learned a little bit about him, and specifically this work. And I there was a couple things that I thought were funny. Like, for instance, he really hated this story. When I was reading this story, I really liked it. I thought it was well written and interesting, and I could see the inspiration for a lot of later stories and themes that we see in other work. But he wrote this to get money, and he wrote it in an episodic fashion. So what you'll notice when we go on to the next ones is that each one starts off with a little bit of a summary of the last part. And he really hated that. He thought it was totally unnatural. The guy that he wrote it for was a friend of his, and he was told to not be too morbid. And he just felt like this was just taking an artist and forcing him to act like a machine. He just hated everything about this. So he called the work that it was originally published in a vile rag.
Okay. I mean, what I have read about H.P. Lovecraft, and I think I mentioned it in the last live stream, that was, it was, I don't know, it shocked me a little bit, and I think it has a little bit of what he has been writing in, and that's why we talked about that last part in the live stream, that his mom was really overprotected. I mean, she was really trying to take him out of all of the world, and she was only trying to protect him. And it seems like that's why he was writing all of this, or that's the way that he started writing all of this, talking about schizophrenia and psychological behavior into his stories. That's something that was, I think it was opinionated in that article, but I guess it might be at a certain point true, but I don't think that he had a mental issue at all. But I think he was trying to relate at a certain point the way that he was being taken care of, right? He was overprotected and he couldn't see the world. Maybe the world for him when he was little was being seen as the bad world, that something that he couldn't reach, or it was too bad for him. Those were my thoughts, by the way, when I first read that.
Yeah, and we can talk about it more when we get to a later part, but I feel like there's like a line that's almost specifically taking shots at his mother. And I really do see, and I've met people like this as well, that they're raised by people that are extremely religious and perhaps maybe not very thoughtful in their religion, but very constrained to it. And then their children, especially sons, I've found,
Mhm.
really rebel against that in embracing. Nowadays, it tends to be what are they? Hermeticism, that idea of like Illuminati and all of that. I've definitely met people that seem to embrace that sort of thing, and I think they do it to be shocking or as a sort of rebellion to the way they were raised.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm. Well, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to like go into like the illuminated state, like, or maybe trying just to be like a normal rebel. It's just like, okay, I was being brought, or I've been looking the world into this scope, but I wanted to show what I really want to look of the world, or I don't know if you get my point, but that's it's not about being overprotected, but it's about how can I show the world in my writing, and that's how I feel that he was doing. But I didn't read that he didn't like the story. That's interesting.
Yeah, I've read a few quotes where he just trashes it, and it is regarded by his fans. I'm also learning that I probably wouldn't get along with his fans. It's
Okay.
regarded by his fans as his poorest work. And so I'm really looking forward to, I don't know if we'll do it together or if I'll be doing
Mm-hmm.
it on my own, looking at some of his more popular work and comparing it and seeing if I agree. Because to listen to the fans talk about him and his work, I hate this guy. But to read his work, I
Really?
really enjoy it. Yeah.
I mean, I do think that he has something really good in his hands. I mean, well, he had really good things in his hands by writing all of these short stories. I mean, I was really like plugged into the first chapter, and I tried to relate it to the movie. Obviously, it didn't relate it too much. Maybe certain names and what they were doing, but but it really catches you. It's like it's you want to keep on reading the chapters,
Yeah.
right?
That's something that I really noticed even with individual parts. Like if we look at even just the first sentence or two of Herbert
Mm-hmm.
West. Okay, so we know we're talking about Herbert West, and
Which was the doctor, right? Which
that's
was
right.
like the the guy that came from Europe, I think,
That's right. In the film, he comes from
in the
Europe.
film.
That's it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And so we have that just like I'm just looking at this sort of the way that it's grammatically set up. We have
Mm-hmm.
the name of the character immediately, and then who was my friend in college and in afterlife. And so that tells us exactly how he relates to the narrator. And
Exactly.
I really like that wording in afterlife. Like that gives us the idea of how we often think about life after death.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak only with extreme terror. And so normally we would not see a sentence organized that way, but I think it is so perfect for an opening line for a story because it has the subject, the relation of the subject to the narrator, and then a strong, powerful emotion that tells us, gives us a question: why is he afraid? And then instead
Yes.
of telling us directly why he has this terror, the next line is, this terror is not due altogether to the sinister manner of his recent disappearance. So there's another question. Okay. And I'm noticing Lovecraft do this, that he, instead of talking about something, he talks around something. Because he's got this, I heard this one line that's a quote from him. The oldest and strongest emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest fear is the fear of the unknown. And listening to people talk about his work and things like that, I notice him talking around things. So this terror is not due altogether to the sinister manner of his recent disappearance. So we don't know why he disappeared, and we want to know, and it's a sinister thing, and it's terrible, right? But
Exactly. But he started off from there.
yeah, yeah,
That
exactly.
that's great. It's like he's starting off from there, then he tells you the story, and then after that he just like accept that he is gone, and you want to know what happened next.
Yeah, yeah.
So another part of the story that I was reading, well, that I was like trying to understand why this perspective of the story is not the same, obviously, from the movie, which is I'm talking like in um, about my friend, right? Obviously, in the movie, it wasn't the friend. They just get to know each other,
Yeah, they're colleagues. Yeah.
and that if you if you remember on the last short story that we were reading, it was almost the same kind of difference in between the characters. Remember
Right.
that they have like a different. I think it was also there. They were also friends, like really great friends. But
Oh,
the
right. Yeah.
but in the movie, this guy was the assistant, and the other one was just a doctor, a crazy doctor. And in this case as well, this is like my friend, my really good friend, and I suddenly became an assistant because
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in his work. But obviously, in the movie was brought up for us in a different manner,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I think I kind of like that for a film more because like these stories, and as I understand it, most of Lovecraft's work is written from the first person perspective, so I and me and that sort of thing, instead of saying, like, I think the character's name in the film is Dan Kane or something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so I think that it works better in terms of especially a short story, psychological horror, in having that first person perspective. But from a film perspective, I really like them having a context where they meet the guy, and we sort of get introduced to the guy not only through his introduction and his context, but also through the other character's reaction to him. So we see the first appearance, and also we see how the other character responds to that first appearance, and that tells us so much more.
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
but
I
the thing is
like.
that yes, I do understand that point of view, but I will have wanted to see how this, let's say this character, I mean the one that it's telling the story, will have shown everyone else that Herbert West is not a bad guy. Because that's the first impression when you get to know this guy in the movie. You get to know, I mean, you see this guy, the way that he's acting, and you think about this guy is suspicious.
Yeah,
Something is wrong with him. The way that he talks, the way that he is so passionate about things. And in here, since we don't know exactly what he is trying to, I mean, this guy's point of view of his friend is like it's passionate, yes, but he is not showing any emotions from this guy,
right, right. Yeah,
right? I don't have any emotions like the last short story. I cannot see any emotion. I can only see how passionate he was and how calm he was.
yeah. I think
That's it.
not to spoil it later, but I think that we will have more description of him. This was almost sort of an introduction to the story,
Yeah, of
um,
course.
and I
Of
think we have
course.
more sort of like present scenes where there's actually a little bit of discussion and things and expression. I think
Okay,
going on more. But there, yeah,
okay, I
you're
have
right.
a question for you.
Sure.
Relating from this short story, this first chapter, to the movie, which will be the cut in this case? Which part do you think this will be the cut of?
Like, which
Like,
part of
if
the film was this? Is that what you're saying?
yes,
I,
like
I
if
would say that this is probably not even in the film. Um,
exactly. That's like
and it's like the film
same thing.
doesn't the film takes place over a couple days or something, right?
Hmm.
A week at the most. And this is over the course of 17 years.
You know, I I was thinking, and as you said, I don't want to like also spoil anything
Well, I'm
from the
not spoiling
movie
it. That's
or
in the
any
beginning here.
no, no, no. It's like the short story because I don't want to like go over it. But I think this is, I mean, the as I said on the first short story and the movie, I think this is, as you said, the beginning, and this is the story of how Herbert West decided to develop that. I mean, what he was doing in his own country,
Oh, okay, okay.
right? And that's what I'm feeling, but I don't remember exactly. I should have searched for that specific information, but it was, where did he came from exactly?
That's the thing is I don't think he's foreign in this one. I seem to remember it's his research and he's
Hmm.
from the States somewhere, if not the local area. Uh,
Yeah,
it doesn't say in the first part here.
yeah. It just said, it just have like Christchurch Cemetery, Pottersfield, and Arkham, mm, Miskatonic University Medical School in Arkham. I will have like tried to see if this relates to somewhere.
Well, this Arkham place apparently is a fictional place that he's made up, and he uses these in several stories. And people that use the sort of Lovecraft mythos, they will refer to these places, but they're not real.
I wonder.
Lovecraft
I
grew up
wonder
in
if.
Providence.
Okay, I wonder if the whole story of Batman. I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up, but also Batman and the
Arkham
Batman
Asylum.
stories, yes, come from Arkham.
Yeah, Arkham Asylum is named after. I know a Batman fan told me this once that Arkham Asylum is named after the Lovecraft Arkham.
Oh, that's a really good thing to know.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And Batman, I think, like it changed a lot over the years, and I think it really only started to become the Batman we know in like the 50s. But Batman was around earlier than that. Like I think there were comics in the 30s, so that would have been around the Lovecraft era.
Okay. But that's the thing, that there isn't anything that will make you relate to a specific part of the world.
Oh,
I
I
couldn't
think it
I
does.
couldn't find anything
Maybe
that.
maybe it was in the other material I was reading, but I seem to remember it does say where it. Yeah, it's in Massachusetts. I think I read that in other material when I was researching Lovecraft.
Hmm.
I think this place Arkham is set in Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, it's strange why they did like this relationship in between, going in, I mean, taking this character from Europe and making him to travel to states.
Well, in the film, it sort of has the idea that, like, I kind of got the idea that maybe he had stolen the reagent from somebody, or there could be another idea that he was like fleeing from some sort of horrible thing that he had caused. Right? He might have been a
Yeah.
criminal. Um,
I mean, I'm feeling like this part because remember that the ending of this of this chapter, I'm sorry, it says that this, let me see what's the name of this, the Chapman place
mhm.
was, it was completely burned.
Right.
So I was thinking that maybe that was like that connection in between him leaving that place or leaving his country.
Well, I just from some of the stuff I read later, I think that's probably not the case. But keep your eyes
Mhm.
open for that and see. There might be a few inconsistencies with that, but you might be right.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
it would have to, I think, happen in the middle. The movie would have had to have happened in the middle because this is 17 years.
Exactly. That's the relationship that I was doing. It's like, okay, maybe this is the first part, and then later on
Yeah, we
is
could
the
have like the
movie.
movie in between like part one and part two, or part two and part three, or something like that, and then the rest of the story could happen. That's possible. Yeah. You'd have to change some things, but that's interesting that you're looking at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me see. There is another part that I wanted to like bring up. When I related of the experiment, I do relate it to um, how he wanted to do all of these experiments. but this is like going ahead into the movie. What do you think about it?
Sorry, that he wants to. You wanted to talk about
Because because
stuff that happens in
because
the
the
movie?
yeah, it's like the timeline, right? The timeline in between what he's telling that they were doing all of the experiments with the guinea pigs and with all of this like dead bodies, well, animals, and then they decided to go onto a real human being
Mm-hmm.
that it's not dead for long. It brings up to one part of the movie. So what we were telling before is like a little bit like it's I'm
Well,
what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it similar to the movie, but I cannot find I can find similarities, but I cannot find a trace.
is this the brawny guy? Yeah,
Yes.
this is the brawny guy that they bring back first, and I think that in the film was the bodybuilder guy at the beginning. The first one that they resurrect, he's actually the body double for Arnold Schwarzenegger, or was at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that character, I think, is this brawny. Because the way that they're describing this guy,
Mm-hmm. It has the same similarities.
yeah, brawny young workman drowned only the morning before in
Mm-hmm.
Sumner's Pond and buried. Oh, they describe him again later, I think. But yeah, he's a really big guy.
Yeah. Yeah, but the way, well, as I said, I'm trying to get some similarities from the movie and the short story, but I couldn't find a good solid spot to say, oh, this looks like it. Because the only thing that has been moved to the movie from this short story was like how passionate this first character is, which is Herbert West,
Mhm.
that how he was investigating something and how he wanted to experiment, um, and how he wanted to be like doing his investigations on the ground.
Right, right. Yeah, it seems to me like this is the same sort of beginning to both of the stories, but what they've changed is Herbert West is now coming from this area, and I guess it just says he was my friend in college and in Afterlife, so they could have met here. But yeah, like that's where I think that this story is starting out, and the change is that Herbert West is from the States. There's no mention of him being from a foreign place.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have the same sort of like anger about his research. I found like you remember him snapping the pencils in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then it's like,
yeah,
mm-mm.
yeah.
But
So he seemed a lot
but
more
I
angry about it. Go ahead.
but I think we are getting ahead because we haven't even talked about anyone else. But I wanted to like bring up this name, which is Dr. Alan Halsey. Is that the doctor that was the teacher there?
Yeah, yeah. I think he's the guy that in the film. I'll just look at the cast there. Um,
Just wanted to make sure because I don't remember.
Dr. Carl Hill. Oh, okay. So the main doctor in that one was Dr. Carl Hill.
Okay.
Oh, Dean Helsley. Oh, he was the father of the woman.
Okay, so this doctor was the one that was
So
this is
so the doctor that gets his head cut off, that's a different character. But
I know.
this Dean Halsey or Halsey
Hmm.
is the same name, and he was the father of the girl, and he ends up getting reanimated. He gets killed in the
Yes.
morgue, and then they reanimate him, and then everybody comes in, and then
Yeah,
they
you're
put him.
telling
They
part
walk
of the
away.
story.
Oh,
You're
well, I
telling
was talking
part of
about
the
the movie.
story.
I was talking about the movie.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
I
Yeah,
just for the record, I haven't hit that part in the story, so.
okay, yes. Um, that's interesting because well, the person that it's talking here, it's saying about how benevolent he was or he is, because he works in behalf of the stricken in recalled blah blah blah. And so he seems like the person that it's talking in this short story really thinks he really thinks of a good way of this Dr. Alan Halsey.
Yeah, they do describe him well, and like as a good person,
As a good person.
and I think it's really interesting because I've read ahead and seen some other things that fill this out more, but I see this as really describing this idea that comes from, I think, Lovecraft's growing up with his Puritan mother, in that there's these sort of religious myths that he think, like the soul,
Mm-hmm.
that he thinks that are not true, but the truth. Like if people knew the truth, then they'd start asking other questions and learning about other horrible truths, right? And so this benevolent, closed-minded Halsey, uh, he believes in all the old rhetoric about death and things like that. But when Herbert West realizes that's not true and he goes beyond this religious myth, then he starts doing these horrible things, like
Mm-hmm.
animating these dead things, which I see a few examples in this first part where they're definitely talking about, like, this is not life. They're animating it. It's totally different. Um, there's one example of them trying to resurrect the animals, but he tries working on animals that are like not fully dead and that you just can't mix. He sought extreme freshness in his specimens, injecting his solutions into the blood immediately after the extinction of life. Oh wait, no wait, just before that. There we go. Where does this sentence start here? It had at first been his hope to find a reagent which would restore vitality before the actual advent of death, and only repeated failures on animals had shown him that the natural and artificial life motions were incompatible. So I think that's one example of them telling us that, like, these things aren't alive. He's not bringing them back to life. He's just animating them. And then when we talk about the screaming of the thing in the farm,
Yeah.
okay, he says, we left there, burst the most appalling and demoniac succession of cries that either of us had ever heard. For in one inconceivable cacophony was centered all the supernatural terror and unnatural despair of animate nature. So they're talking about how this is not it's not. It is not. Yeah. Human it could not have been. It is not in man to make such sounds. And so I think, again, he's pointing out that this is not alive, or whatever it is, it's not a human being anymore. Like, I don't know if by nature, animate nature, he means like a beast or an animal, but it's not a human being coming back to life.
Yeah. What else I wanted to rescue from this? Did the movie mention about this Chapman place? Do you remember the name of the part that the name of the building that the doctor was going to rent and that he was searching for someone to rent with?
I don't remember other ones being mentioned, but he ends up renting the spare room of the other guy, the guy that's dating the woman, that I think is that Dan Kane sort of substitute for the narrator.
Yes, exactly. But I don't know if they used the same location, like
I think
what
that
they
was
said
in
the
the
old.
city. Yeah, in fact, I seem to remember that there were scenes where you could see out the door or maybe the
Mm-hmm.
window, and you could see the street and other houses.
Oh, okay.
And I think that his explanation, again, this is the film, the explanation for the cat dying was that he had found, well, oh no, wait, he said he had found it in the garbage. Never mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, what else?
I really liked the fact that this corpse was digging at its own grave, almost like, and they also mention that they wish that it was underground, that they'd feel better if it was underground. I think they mentioned that
Mhm.
here. They might mention it later, uh, where they'd feel
Mm,
more comfortable.
no, I don't think they said that here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, that's a reference later. But this idea that this thing wants to go back to where it was buried,
Hmm.
I find it really interesting. And later on, this is spoiling a little bit, but he mentions I like we'd feel better about this thing if we knew it was underground. Like this idea that bodies should be buried. They shouldn't be up and around, walking around. And not only do the people know this, the bodies know this.
Yeah, but that's that. I think that's a similarity that has with the movie. I think that they were showing, even though they were animating the body. Again, as you said, this is about the movie. This is not about the short story. But the doctor that finally was killed and he, I don't know, was reanimated. He was thinking. I mean, he, let's say he had at least certain brain function, right? At least he remembered this girl and that he wanted her.
Yeah, there was
And
the one doctor that he even could talk and things like that. Yeah, there was definitely a lot
exactly.
going on there. It was hilarious because he could direct his body,
Yes,
even though he was
that's
decapitated.
that exactly that was really funny, and that will tell you something. I mean, but I don't know if that happens if we read like the whole short story, but I mean, I haven't read it all, so I don't know. But the thing is that connection in between the mind or the brain and the body with this fluid, if that could be the case, by separating the brain and the body, and only with this fluid will be enough for them to connect, even though they are apart.
Yeah, and that's there's definitely something else going on there, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The other part that was, as well, this was part of the movie, that was that if you injected the fluid to a dead body, it will start moving, it will start creating all of this chaos. But I don't remember if they were actually injecting more fluid to this reanimated corpse.
In the film, they kept on doing it. Yeah, like I think that.
But
Uh,
they didn't do it like for the other ones that were walking. Not even the this girl's father.
Yeah, I don't remember about him. Yeah, and he seems to get lobotomized and then it seems to be fine. Like he doesn't seem to keep on getting it injected, and I don't know why.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know why the doctor that ends up getting decapitated would want to keep him alive. But the doctor that gets decapitated, I seem to remember scenes where he's injecting both the body and the head, and I seem to remember the head like drinks blood, like he sets it
He
down in
needed
blood or
blood.
something. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
But I do remember that this Herbert, I mean the character there, was also using the fluid on himself.
That's right. And that's something, yeah, that we definitely haven't seen here. And it seems
Mhm.
inconsistent with what that line about there being an incompatibility.
Yes, and I wanted to bring what you said before about injecting directly into the animals, like in between their life and death, and they can only see not being fully brought to life, but only reanimating. I mean, just the dead bodies were only reanimated, but not
Hmm.
having full
Hmm.
natural life. And I think that will be the answer. And that might be the reason why they use that for the film, because it was only a reanimator. It's like when you're in, I don't know, when you're injecting, what's this called? anabolics, I think.
Like
That's
steroids or
yeah, steroids.
okay. What about them?
Because if you're telling me that you are injecting something to someone and it will be animating you, right? It's something like this steroids, that you are trying to get your muscles to be bigger, right? They're doing some purpose, but
Well, yeah, he like Herbert West is injecting himself in order to stay awake longer so that he can work more. He says in the film. Uh, yeah, but like steroids that we would inject in ourselves to build ourselves up, those are just mimicking the steroids that are naturally already in our body. They sort of play that role for us because they'll either be synthetic, so they'll be created, or they'll be from an animal. So I would see that as sort of the same thing. Like it seems like there's a mystical thing. Maybe I'm reading that into it, but this idea that there's this animated nature versus something that is alive. It seems like a mystical difference to me, and almost like this idea of the soul was wrong. I think that's the way that Lovecraft would think about it. But that there is something that they don't know, that they're crossing over this barrier that they shouldn't be crossing over, that previously the soul had sort of warned them not to cross over, but there was actually something behind what we call soul that they should have been aware of.
yeah, exactly. Let me try and search for something else I wanted to bring up. If you have something else to say, just in case, because I have like different points that I wanted to bring.
About the story, I don't think specifically. I would just point out again that I think I will become bored with it. In that he so often says things are too horrible to describe, which I think is kind of interesting and neat. But after I hear it so many times, I am no longer really impressed by it, and I would like him to give more description. But so far, I really like it because it gives that mystery.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that he writes, I think. It's just the way to get you interest, and that's how, I mean, I'm guessing that we're going to find these same resources in every single short story or book that he have written.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how much he grew as a writer, because everybody's saying this is his poorest work, which, and I'm really enjoying this. So if he doesn't grow a lot, I'm probably gonna like this more than I like his later work.
But remember that the short story that we read before, it was from 1934, I think.
Yeah, it was from the 30s. Yeah,
and he died 1937. So I'm guessing that the first short story that we read was like one of the newest, well, the oldest,
the latest one.
the latest one that he wrote.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think so far I like this one more.
This is like a very soft way to introduce, I mean, a complete difference from the other one that we read, even though that one was like a small condensed one. So I'm guessing that he needed to use all of the resources that he, I don't know, distribute around the 6 chapters. And that's why he just have to like condense it into bring it up into one. I mean, talking of the last short story, but from this one, it was easy to read, and you still want more. And I couldn't relate for what you were telling us. Well, you were telling now that Lovecraft didn't like this story.
Yeah, that's what's interesting is the things that you're pointing out about like the hooks. They're supposed to start with a summary and end with a hook, and I find that he did a good job at these. I found that these made it more interesting to read, and yet he hated it. He complained about it just ruining the art.
Maybe because he was too light. I mean, he was too soft into this.
What do you mean by that?
By comparing the two short stories, if you compare this first chapter with the other short story that we read, what would you think about those? I mean, about these two short stories.
I think I understand what you mean in terms of the other one being more gruesome, but yeah, I find this one much more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think I probably have some natural aversion to some of Lovecraft's mythos. I really hate occultism, and a lot of occult ideas I don't think are very deep. And so that's probably another reason why I'm more drawn to this story than the other one, because it was really drawing on that sort of uncaring universe sort of mythos. Whereas this one, I almost feel like it supports a lot of traditional morals in that, yes, they are doing this and it makes sense that these characters are doing this, but they shouldn't be doing this and horrible things are going to happen because they're doing this. And I'm probably also a really big fan of the idea that maybe we need to redefine certain ideas or change them, but that there is a lot of great things in religion that have instilled society with things that we just can't replace, and we shouldn't just step over as if they're not there.
Do you think he might have been like pushed to do like this? I mean, to write this in this way?
I read a quote from the guy that paid him to do this in this one,
Mm-hmm.
like this first short story. This is the first one he was ever paid for, by the way, and that's why he did it. Was he was paid $5 per part?
Oh,
Yeah, and he, with the guy that hired him to do it, was a friend of his, and he just absolutely railed against it. He basically said that he was a slave driver, and he said that he didn't want it to be as morbid. And apparently, the
okay.
serial that this was published in was supposed to be witty and humorous. And I even heard an allusion somewhere to this story being witty and humorous. So before I started reading it, I was like, "Oh, okay. I bet you there's going to be lots of little jokes and things like that in there. I'm going to find this funny." And the film I did find very funny in many ways. I think the sort of the gore lends itself to a sort of slapstick humor. Uh, but when I was reading this, even with my eyes open, I just didn't see the humor. Uh, and there's a line that I have read from a later part, and
Mhm.
I've seen quoted in an article talking about the humor in it, and I just don't read it as funny.
Maybe this was the way to do jokes at that time.
Maybe
And
it's just
that's
a sense of
why,
humor I'm missing. Yeah,
exactly, maybe there's like dark jokes that we don't understand.
yeah. Like
Mm.
there was a couple things that I saw when we were reading it together that I thought, that's just about invisible to me. Uh,
Mhm.
and it might not have been invisible at the time. And it was talking about something to do with religious sensibilities, or it was talking about the body. Okay, so they talk about the freshness of the body, and they talk about the contents of the coffin. And maybe to somebody in the 1920s that would have been funny, uh,
Mhm.
because normally you would speak about the body of the departed in such a reverent way that talking about the contents of a coffin just seems very irreverent and light with the material.
Yeah.
So I didn't see the humor in there, but I thought maybe that could have been what was humorous at the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me, I couldn't find any funny quotes or any jokes here. But it wasn't like a really like dense reading like the last short story. It was really soft. It was really a normal one to read.
Yeah, I really felt like it lured us into this world where it sort of told us, hey, there's this mystery, and here's the story that led us into the mystery. And not a lot had to happen in the story, but it was still exciting for me.
Yes, exactly. But we still know what's going to happen. So it's not like that um, out of the blue. But
Hmm.
it's been already. I mean, you get the whole gist of it. Like you get what they're doing, even though we don't know exactly what they're mixing because they don't tell it. I mean, they don't say it
Right.
out loud,
Yeah.
but you know that you have that, and then you're going to experiment with something, and that something needs to move. That's the only. Those are the two or three resources that you have in your mind,
Hmm.
and what else? Let me see. What else? Maybe one funny part for that time will have been that they just left that chaos and they were just like running around, and they left that that place when they were just doing all of this new solution, and they heard something and they just run for their lives.
Yeah, like I could see that being a funny scene, but it's just
Mhm.
not told in a humorous way. Uh,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if I wanted to try and force or trying to, I really want to try to force an like in a joke or something, but I think that that will be it for me. Imagine those two running without even looking back, but that's
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. I could see it a little bit, and vaulting frantically or madly into the starred abyss of the rural night. Yeah, I could imagine that. And then the way that they
Something
come back into the
might be
town, and then they're kind of like a couple drunken guys. Like
exactly. I mean,
I could see some humor in that, but it's just not. Yeah, I don't see anything in the writing to point me in that direction,
light
and I'm
humor.
just yeah, exactly. I'm so occupied by the fright of it that they've brought back this horrible creature, and it's screaming in a way that a man couldn't scream. Like
And
what sort of like I've got so many questions.
and you know what? That's I think that's the main difference in between what we read before and that. I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up, but if you ask me, in here they are, I don't know if I should say humanizing, or they are like lowering what they did, right? Because they are not even mentioning that. I mean, they mention it slightly. It's like something happened to that. Maybe it burned or what happened, and then they said that it was just going back to the grave. But they didn't mention anything else. They just said they heard the noise and they just run.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
we
it.
didn't see something. That's right. Yep. Yep.
Exactly. They didn't decide to go and check that out, and they didn't like see the creature,
Yeah.
right? So there isn't
Whereas that
any grotesque description of what they saw.
yeah, in the film, the first time we see an animated human, a person gets
Hmm.
killed.
Exactly. So I actually don't feel that. I'm sorry about the dogs, by the way.
No, no problems. It's very quiet.
So the thing is that I cannot feel that terror. I just feel that they were just doing experiments and something went wrong and they decided to leave. So that's why
Oh,
it's so.
you didn't feel the terror for them running out.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay, yeah,
There is a this is like a suspense. It's like there is something happening, but they are not bringing it as in terror.
okay, yeah, because for
Not
me,
not like the short story. Uh-huh.
uh, it do you mean like in the last short story there was more terror? Is that what you're saying? Okay, yeah.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
For me, this was terrifying. Maybe because I knew of the story from the film, but when I was reading, and they put it into this really burly guy, and then they left him. I was like, oh my gosh, there's a reanimated corpse somewhere in the house, and what is it going to do? So I was already concerned before they even suggested that it was coming back. And then it does these horrible screams, and in my mind, I'm thinking, like, why is it like that? How much of the person is left? Like, is it just some sort of a possession, like some sort of a demon inside of it? Or is it someone that's like gone to the edge of life and seen such horrible things that they've gone insane and it's transformed them into this other kind of creature? And what does this thing want? Is it just struggling? Is it just in pain? Is it just scared? Or does it want to go after these people that did this to it? And so as they're running out, I was terrified. Yeah.
But for me, it was like they just minimized the problem.
Yeah, it's definitely not like in your face killing people like it was in the film. Yeah.
Exactly. It was. I feel that it was just like a failed experiment. That's it. It was a failed experiment that they could left behind, and that's it.
Yeah.
What happened to it?
The thing that's present for me in this is maybe the danger to them is not so real, especially since we know this guy is around 17 years later, right? But as opposed to the film, the psychological horror was so much stronger, because I'm thinking, what is this thing and what sort of experience is it having and what sort of like motivations and goals does it have? Which is a question that I never really asked myself in watching the films. Watching Reanimator, I just thought, oh, okay, it's just a zombie. I've seen a million zombie movies before. It wants to eat his brains, probably, which was not true. As we watched more of the film, they had other reasons for behaving, but I just wasn't driven to ask the same questions with the film as I have been with this story.
Okay, let me try and see what else we can bring. What would you think about the burning of this whole Chapman house? Do you really think that it was just like the narrator said, that it was just like inexplicably burned to ashes?
Oh, well, I think they were saying inexplicably in the sense that I took it. I didn't think that the narrator found it inexplicable. I thought that he was talking about the news report and that they didn't know why this old abandoned house had burned down, but that they knew the real truth. Which I think
they said, they said that it was a lamp.
Right, that we could understand because of the upset lamp. Yeah. So I think what they're saying is inexplicably, what they're saying is that the news says that there was no explanation for it, in the same way that saying two items in the paper wholly unrelated made it impossible for us to sleep. So I don't think they believe that they are unrelated. I think they believe they're related, but I think he's talking about in the paper they were unrelated, and in the paper it reported as inexplicable.
Yes, but the thing is that the narrator is not saying that they did it, but something happened in the house, obviously that make it burn to the ground, right? They said it was a lamp.
Right, because Herbert West, when he's over the lamp, where is it here?
That's what I wanted to go. I mean, into that, especially specifically that the narrator is not telling the audience who did it.
Right, yeah.
So he's trying to take the guilt out of the other character. So I'm guessing that this is like the true intention of Herbert West, like to take their guilt out, like they just burn it to the ground because it went wrong.
Oh,
but they didn't say it.
So you're thinking that he purposely knocked over the lamp because he was so horrified by what he had done. That's an interesting reading of it. I never took it that way because I just felt like he was so invested with his work that he would not risk himself and lose all of that. Like they set up that laboratory pretty carefully. But yeah, I mean, it's possible that could be read into it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was the way that they were trying to secure the laboratory and deciding to tell something else if they were caught. So he didn't want it he didn't want that to be out in the open or someone to know about it. So I am guessing that he, well, talking about Herbert, because as I said, there isn't any emotion that I could bring apart from him being passionate and being calm. But I
Right.
think,
Yeah.
like, I mean, apart from all of that, he was a really I think it's self-calculated or just calculated person that I think he knew what he wanted to do. Like, if he couldn't get what he wanted, then he was going to delete the evidence.
Okay.
So this
Uh,
is like the way to delete it.
yeah, I think you've argued for that well. That's not the way that I read it. I read it as them being surprised and terrified and rushing out. But yeah,
No,
I
I
mean that's
think that's the
possible. Yeah.
emotion of the narrator.
Hmm.
That's the emotion of the narrator, but he's not telling what the other person is feeling.
Right.
That's
Right.
why for me it's just giving me that feeling that the other one wanted to delete everything. The narrator is just following this guy's footsteps because I mean, he's his friend. He loved his job. I mean, what his work, what he's doing, and he's just like in the movie. This person, this, what's the name? Kane, I think, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Dan Kane. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
is his name. Yeah.
yeah. He had a different conception or a different like idea of what Herbert in the movie,
Right. Yeah.
right?
But I think I have to correct you here. That
Mm-hmm.
the he does try to speak for Herbert West as well. Now you could say the narrator has no way of knowing this, but he does say, uh, and without a thought of our late employment or its possible discovery, both West and I madly or leapt into the nearest window like stricken animals, doing all this stuff, overturning tubes, lamp, and retorts. So there's where it gets overturned, and it says that they were not considering what they had just made or its possible discovery. They just ran away. Um, and he says, I think we screamed ourselves. So he's not even sure. He was so much in shock that he doesn't even know exactly what they were doing as we stumbled frantically toward the town. So unless you think that he's misreporting what happened, he is speaking for Herbert West here and saying that Herbert West was absolutely scared and this was not a plan by his.
Hmm. I mean, I will feel that that was his opinion. I
Sure.
mean, the
Okay.
narrator opinion, I think, and that's how
Yeah,
it.
it's a lot of times when one person feels a certain way, they'll sort of read people around them as feeling the same way as well. So that's possible. Yeah.
Yeah, because he seems to be too calm to be acting like this.
Well, they say that he couldn't sleep. Like neither one of them could sleep all day. Oh no, they slept during the day. They couldn't sleep all night for the rest of the night. But then they were able to sleep during the day when they sort of told themselves that it was just them being nervous that they had overheard that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand that kind of feeling, but
Yeah.
I'm
I
guessing that uh-huh.
I also really like this in that this when you get really scared and you panic about something and then later you have a little bit of time to think about it and calm down, you reason through things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what they've done here, except the thing that they were so panicked about we know is real. And so it gives us that I feel like it's a Lovecraftian theme of this mystery that you want to go back and check, but the wanting and going back and checking it is putting you into danger and could drive you insane.
Yeah, exactly.
And the
Wow.
idea that like they've had this experience but then they rationalize it away, they're going to want to try to investigate that again because that terrible thing, you want to look back in the closet and make sure that wasn't a skeleton, right?
Yeah, and they cannot. I mean, in this case, they cannot go back because it's already. I mean, what happened to the corpse?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's even worse because you know that the corpse was just like, I think it says that it was clawing at the earth, right? They found that in the
Right,
grave,
yeah, it tried to get
but they,
back into the grave. That's so creepy.
yeah, but they couldn't. I don't think they found the body.
No, they didn't. No, it said that like it
So
was
it's like,
basically futile because it didn't have a spade.
so that means that it's roaming around, moving around.
Yeah, yeah, and something that's interesting is the reason why we bury people so far down. The main reason is so that animals won't dig after them. But if you had a more shallow grave, which I'm sure happened in many places at many times, then you would have animals digging at them. And so Lovecraft is got this evidence for his story that I think a lot of people would be somewhat familiar with. That sort of claw marks at graves.
Okay, yes, that will have been the story, the typical stories for that time. Like, we found claws in different graves, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
because you would actually see that because there'd be things like coyotes and stuff that would sort of dig at the smell that they smell, and if something's not buried at all, like if it's just got a little bit of soil on top, then the animal will tear it out and eat. Any sort of a carrion eater, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so what I'm saying is that nowadays we live in cities and cemeteries have fences around them and things, but back in the day when people weren't so careful about always burying people so far down and maybe not even having a good coffin, that it would be something that I think a lot of rural communities would be familiar with, that there'd be claw marks near the graves. And now they've got this Lovecraft story telling them that it's because there's this evil doctor somewhere that's reanimated the corpse and the corpse is trying to get back into the grave.
exactly. Oh my god, that's the way that you said it sounds really creepy.
Yeah.
So I think that's about it from the story. I don't think that we can get. I mean, if you have something else to rescue from this first chapter.
No, I think we talked about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of resources that I don't think we had in the movie, and I think after all of these chapters, we'll be able to talk freely about how to join them together and try to figure out what came first. For now, I do believe that the movie came later on from this, at least from this chapter. And what we're going to do next is that we're going to try and read I think the next chapter is a little bit short, as you
Actually, the
said,
next one's
right?
pretty long as well. But
It is. Oh,
the last four I
okay.
think are shorter. From what I
Uh,
saw.
no, I
Um,
think they're no.
okay.
I think the fifth one is a little bit longer than the second, the third, and
Okay.
the fourth. I think. No, the third is a little bit long. So it's like the second, it's not that long.
Okay.
The third one is a little bit longer than the fourth is not that long. Then the fifth is long. I think the sixth one is. Well, I think if we divide this, and I'm sorry that I'm like taking this time just to make sure that if someone is going to watch the whole live stream until here, they know what's going to happen on the next live stream. So the second part will be the plague demon, and then so on, so on, so on. Because we're definitely taking more than an hour to discuss every chapter. So just to make sure that we're not going to like take two chapters and then we're going to take like maybe 3.5 hours to discuss it.
Sure.
We don't want to leave anything behind. There might be some. I know there might be something that we're leaving behind, but definitely if there is someone that is going to be watching the live stream, then if you want to come to do any comments, you know that you can always do, and then we can always try to discuss it with you.
Yeah. Teach us about Lovecraft. Tell us about your experience with his work. because we really are
Yes.
just experiencing for the first time here.
Yes, and I'm still debating if we should, like, after this we try the macabre. I just I need to remember the how to pronounce that. Macabre.
Apparently, there's like three ways. I looked it up, but macabre is the way that I say it. I say
Mac-
macabre. Yeah.
Macabre stories that really, like, took my mind, like, from that. I was like, I need to read this.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm really excited about the short stories in general. So yeah, if you will follow your lead there.
Yeah, I think we can do that. And, well, I don't know if that's online. That's the only thing that I don't know if it's online or not. I will have to search for that and see if we can read it just like we did with this short story. And that's about it. Do you want to, like, add something else?
No, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for doing this with us, Pat. Uh, I hope that this finds an audience. I know that no one was watching this evening, but I hope that people will join us in the future. When are we doing this again?
I think we can do this again on a Tuesday. Let's try to be consistent and try to do every Tuesday. Um, I'm really glad that we're trying to make it different. I mean, this time you gave me the feedback, which is perfect, about putting images and changing the titles. Let's see how that works. I also um, added some tags on the last live stream, so I'm planning on doing that in this live stream as well, to see if people can get engaged, like, and can get
Great.
into this live stream and see if they can try to come with us and check the story as well.
Yeah, I hope so. It'd be really exciting to meet somebody new just because they're interested in Lovecraft.
Yeah, yeah, and then we can try and jump to another writer.
Yeah,
That'll be fun. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I,
I'm
we,
excited to
we
do
we
that too.
still we're still debating which other writer will be, but then I think the last one that we talked about was Edgar Allan Poe. So
Something else, yeah, that's right. And something else is if we want to do something else at some point, uh, as I would be interested in checking out films. One famous director that I have not seen any of his films, or maybe I've just seen parts of some of them, would be Hitchcock. He's
okay.
hugely influential, and I just don't think I might sit down on my own sometime and watch those, but I would far prefer to have somebody else there to share the experience with.
Yeah, and then we can talk about it. It depends.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
will have to, like, make sure that we have everything set up, and we don't. I mean, we get this done, and then we also do the other part, because we can still be doing live streams talking about writers.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm. So, if there isn't anything that we can add, then the last thing that I could say is, like, thank you if anyone is going to be watching this live stream later on, and thank you for staying up till here. I mean, until this part of the live stream. Um, I hope that you enjoyed the story as much as we did. We are still enjoying it because we're still going to be doing this. The next live stream is going to be on Tuesday, hopefully at the same time. Um, I'm sorry that it didn't be as like, quite on time. I'm going to try and work on that. It's actually out of my hands, but I'm going to try as much as I can. Else, I'm going to move a little bit. I don't know if you care about moving a little bit the time, Nicholas. Maybe around 10 my time. Um, what else do I have to add to this? No, that's about it. And if someone has any comments that they want to bring, please do so. Write it down. Or do you have any suggestions for us? Maybe another writer to, I mean, for us to discuss? That'll be perfect. So that's it for now. Thank you, Nicholas, for being here and for being my guest to talk about this short story, and for talking about the movie as well.
Thanks for having me.
So Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next live stream.